presenting sponsors, again, thank you so very much to our amazing sponsors that support the nonprofit show, this conversation, and allowing continued education, knowledge, expertise, and talent to be shared amongst our conversations. Julia Patrick is here, of course, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, as well as myself, Jarrett Ransom, CEO of the Raven Group, also self-professed nonprofit nerd. But today we are really thrilled because we have got a really special guest coming from the Mural Arts Philadelphia, Caitlin Butler. Thank you so much and welcome to joining us today for the Nonprofit Show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, it's really an exciting thing, Caitlin, to have you on, because one of the things that we've spent so much time on the Nonprofit Show is we've been talking about all of the different aspects to surviving, thriving, changing during these times in this pandemic and what it's caused. But the damage or the impact to our arts and cultural institutions, I don't think we're going to know for a long time. It's so substantial. And we have to recognize that, human service elements have come up and really taken a lot of the brunt. So we wanted to talk to you about that kind of view or that lens to how your organization is working and surviving and thriving. So talk to us a little bit about Mural Arts and what it is you do and how you do it.
Yeah, so Mural Arts Philadelphia is about 35 years old, founded in 1984. And our mission is to use public art, socially engaged public art, to ignite change in people and communities and in systems. Much of our work is project-based. We do about 75 to 100 public art projects every year, and everyone engages many partners, engages community leaders, engages participants from all walks of life, and they help both develop the concept for the work and also help to execute it. We also lead a couple of kind of core programs. We work with about 2,000 kids every year in school and after school settings. We work with people who are incarcerated and coming out of prison. We have a workforce development program, a reentry program that connects people to kind of art making and giving back to communities. And then we also do quite a bit of work with the city's Department of Behavioral Health, connecting art making to opportunities for healing. We work with provider agencies, social service agencies. We also do quite a bit with people with refugees and new immigrant communities in Philadelphia. So that's a sort of basic overview.
Wow, I am just like mind blown. And my biggest question, or maybe you don't, or some of those watching, Julia and I both happen to live in Phoenix, Arizona, which is a very large metropolitan area. Does something like this exist outside of Philadelphia? Like, are you aware of other mural projects like this? I'm familiar with, public arts amongst our cities and things like that, but in particular,
That's a great question. So we haven't found something that's exactly like us. We are part public, part private. We're large. We're a larger organization, $10 to $11 million budget. We have this incredible breadth of programs and projects and partnerships. So we haven't found anything quite like that or at that scale. There are other really impressive public art programs in the country, and there are also public art programs that focus on community engagement. But again, not necessarily at the scale that Mural Arts Philadelphia does it, or with the kind of like breadth and depth. I will say that there are artists all over the country and the world who are doing incredible work and could contribute and innovate so much faster if there was more infrastructure in place to support them.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that too. And what have you seen, and Julia, I don't mean to take over, I'm so excited to learn about this. What has been the biggest medium? When I think of mural arts, I think of, going back to graffiti and spray paint, but I've seen in particular during this social injustice conversation, even spreading hope when it comes to the pandemic, Caitlin, a lot of novices like myself, right? I'm an owner of a little free library in my front yard. And so around the library, I use my sidewalk, right, to spread of hope and kindness and just cheer, just pure cheer. But what have you seen, over this transition of the medium of the materials used, right? Because chalk has become a really important and special, I don't know, like way to express ourselves lately.
Yeah, so there's so much in what you just said. I mean, I think you're pointing to individuals are feeling that urge, right, to communicate through visual media at small and large scales. And I think that the sort of like the homegrown, whatever you have, right, whatever you have to do that with, we're seeing that. And actually, our art education program has been releasing video tutorials that actually specifically focus on how people can use materials that are somewhat common in their homes to kind of make art and to develop their skills. So it's interesting to see that shift, given the kind of constraints we're all facing. Our media, we have been doing a lot with vinyl and with print. So one of the big projects that Mural Arts has been undertaking over the last several weeks is partnering with our Department of Public Health to do messaging connected to the behavioral changes that are necessary. Things like social distancing, wearing masks. We've been partnering with sites across the city that are grocery stores, places that are providing food and other kind of social services and health services. And we've been printing. So artists create designs in their homes, and then those get printed onto vinyl stickers that get adhered to surfaces. So that's a medium that we've worked with in the past, but has rapidly accelerated in this moment. And we are, as soon as the city lifted its stay-at-home order, we are beginning to get back into doing paint on walls and the installation methods we usually use. It is possible for artists to do that safely, but we're kind of, ramping back into that now.
Wow. So when you talk about this, I'm thrilled with what you said. I think it's like so cool, and I'm jealous. I think that our community here doesn't have that, and I would imagine there are a lot of people on this episode today thinking the same thing. Damn, I wish we had something like that. So I want to know how you build community support, because obviously your community support is different just a mere 3 months ago than it is now. What are you seeing? Like, how did you get out to those artists and to that community to do this public messaging?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Mural Arts has, even though we do projects, our work is project-based, we have different rosters of projects, we tend to do a lot of repeat collaborations. And we've been in the city for 35 years. So over that time have partnered with, thousands. It's hard to express how broad those partnerships have been. And we've developed a reputation for ourselves, but I also hope for the arts in Philadelphia as being a partner in moments of need, right? Being a go-to when you need a creative solution and you're having a hard time. So, when the Department of Public Health approached us, they were having a hard time figuring out how to get these messages out fast enough, right? And how to get them out in all the languages they needed to go out in, and how to be using maybe imagery instead of text to communicate faster and more effectively. So they saw they had a problem they needed to solve, and they saw us as a partner in solving it. So I think that we are, we were well positioned to be able to sort of pivot in this moment and to think about how we could be of service in a different way given the needs of this crisis.
I love it. Well, the creative community is always one to understand messaging. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of, I think, a big part of what you do. You observe the world, and then you communicate back out, and what form that takes is really your medium. But how interesting. So you really have spent a lot of time building relationships, it sounds like, as an organization, and not just focusing internally. Would that be accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our work, do you mean most recently or over the?
It just seems like maybe historically.
Yeah. We don't do anything without partners. There's no project that doesn't have a long list of partners associated with it. We're always starting something because somebody has brought something to us. So it's very, the work is very collaborative. It's very cross-disciplinary as well. We often work with organizations that don't necessarily have an arts focus and maybe never worked with an arts organization before. So, and our artists, of course, are critical as well. So we have some staff artists, but mostly we contract artists, 250 every year, that we engage in this work. Yeah.
Wow.
may be controversial, but I'm sure this has come up for you before, Caitlin. Talk to me about your vetting process. Like what if someone comes to you with a message that is against the organization's mission or core
Mhm.
values, or, um, there's, again, in that question, there's so much, but talk to me, if you will, about if someone comes to you with a project and
Yeah.
what's the vetting process?
Yeah, well, so there absolutely is a process, and I'm going to describe it, but it's going to make it sound simpler than it is in practice. In practice, this is tough, right? People get very attached to certain ideas and images, and so that's a piece of the work, is being able to create, effective communication and dialogue, and be able to arrive at a shared understanding of what you want to have go up, right, more permanently in public space. But the way that it works is that at the beginning, we won't move forward with a project that doesn't align with the values and priorities of the organization. And so there's like a sort of a decision-making process around that. So, it has to be clear, and it also can't just be feel good, right? It has to be actually clear what specifically this project is going to advance or contribute to, or how it's going to create positive change. And also why the partners that want to work with us are ready for that, right? How they're going to bring capacity and readiness to the table. So that's the first step. Then it's a question of figuring out, okay, who are all the stakeholders that need to be involved in this process? Because they might go beyond, in almost every case, they do go beyond whomever initially approaches us with the concept. And then there's a decision about how we're going to work with them, right? And we have to be clear from the outset, where do you have the ability to change or influence an outcome, and where are the boundaries where that's not possible, right? So if we're working on city property, for example, at the end of the day, the city is going to be able to say yay or nay, right? And that has to be clear to everybody from the get-go, because the worst thing is to raise expectations of power where then somebody could eventually be told, actually, no, you don't have the ability to move forward. So clarity and transparency around that is really important. As an image gets developed, the artist does come back, to those stakeholders, ask them for feedback, ask them for input, iterates the image. The artists we work with are amazing. They understand that they are working collaboratively, that it's not just their vision that matters. And so they go through many drafts. And then we actually do have a formal design review, which looks specifically at the aesthetic aspects of the work, and engages people who have a background and an eye for that. And then that's also a piece of the process that can produce revisions. So there's a lot of there's a lot of steps to the process, and it can get really sticky. You can get to places where it's really challenging. But I think, to the organization's credit, and to the communities that we collaborate with credit. Sorry, that's a little strange phrasing, but I mean, I can't remember incidents of having to shut down a project because of disagreement around what it should be.
Do you think that's because you have Mural Arts Philadelphia has a good brand?
Well, I think the brand helps it gives us a running head start, right? It creates a basis of trust. It gets people to say yes faster, right? I think that is really important. But once you're in the process, I really think it's the process itself that allows for that kind of progression towards an outcome.
Do you do any pop-up projects where they're like short term, or are you looking at these installations as like a permanent piece, becoming a permanent piece of your city?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we used to really do murals. That was our main medium. About 10 years ago, we began to broaden and work with artists that work in a wide range of media. We've done light installation, we've done sculpture, radio, performance, all kinds of different things. And that's been a really exciting progression in our work. I think one critical question what you want to ask at the beginning of a project is, what is the right medium for this project? In some cases, muralism will make sense, and it does offer not permanent, but a more lasting kind of symbol and beacon and site, right, of memory around that sort of special moment and process. In some cases, it may be that you want to work in a space that wouldn't say yes to a mural, but would be fine with a temporary intervention. And so it's great to have that option as well. And in some cases, the process and the conversation is so important that something that's going to be ephemeral and sort of urgent feeling is going to be more effective than something that goes on the wall for a long time. So you have to kind of figure out what is the medium that aligns to the goal.
Wow, amazing. I also think that it's got to be somewhat hard in a community such as yours. I think of Philadelphia as having, a very specific look and drawing back to the foundational history of our country. And it seems to me like it might be hard to get something new and different where you might have like this contingency of thought and aesthetic that's driving back. We have to represent a particular look, this historical thing, and new and different's not going to work.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, Philly definitely does have an architectural aesthetic. I think the classic idea of a mural arts mural is the 3-story, the side of a 3-story brick row home. We definitely don't work in a particular aesthetic, though. I think that's actually an interesting feature of our practice. Most of the murals in Philadelphia are ours, though not all of them. But we really defer a lot to the community's preferences aesthetically and to the individual artists and the styles that they bring. So there's not a specific mural arts aesthetic. But it is interesting to think about how, like, even in my own head, I think of mural arts and I think of this, very specific, like, sort of shape and size for a mural on those really classic Philadelphia row homes.
Wow, interesting. I'm curious, Caitlin, and I kind of want to switch gears here, if you would. Would love to nerd out with you, learn more. I believe you said $11 million operating budget. If you could address what this pandemic has done for the organization, let's say over the last now 4 months, right? In particular, sustainability, reimagining, repurposing. How have your supporters shown up? And just talk to us about your pivot within the organization and your community.
Sure. So yeah, and I will just say at the outset, it's not been an easy 4 months. I think probably that's the case for every nonprofit, but we have not had we've been fortunate compared to a lot of our peers who've had to completely shut their doors or wholly reliant on, income that comes from in-person engagement. Mural Arts, we had largely raised the dollars necessary to run our programs through the end of our fiscal year. We received quite a bit of support from the city itself. About 35% of our budget comes from city contracts. And so, we're looking at decreases to those moving forward as a consequence of the pandemic, but we were solid through these first several months of it in terms of that support being locked in. We also, we did have to cancel. Mural Arts raises quite a bit of unrestricted money every year on a big annual event that happens in May or June. And we unfortunately did have to cancel that. We just felt like that was the best choice at that time due to sort of health and safety considerations, but also, believing in this moment that like event-based giving or event-based fundraising wouldn't feel as effective. It would be a little bit tone deaf to like the level of sort of need that was emerging. And so decided to cancel, with a lot of support and input from our board, decided to cancel that. What we turned to make up for that loss, which, to be clear, was around $500,000, right, in unrestricted operating revenue to $11 million. That doesn't necessarily sound like a lot, but in terms of what we need to operate, that's more like $2 or $3 million. So it was a significant chunk of that. And so what our administrative costs are is it's about 20% of that total. So we turned to our board. They've been amazing. A lot of them have really stepped up. We've been able to be really clear. I think that's an important piece here about what we need to continue to be successful, right? And to continue to move through this period of time with resilience and stability. Nobody was not working. We converted to a fully remote workplace. And we also we converted all of our programs, right, to digital outreach, to tutorials, to Google Classroom. Artists continued working in their studios. We started up a number of new partnerships, like the one I was describing earlier with the Department of Public Health. So we weren't in an issue of trying to find resources. We were still operating, so we needed support to continue to operate. So our board was really incredible. Some of our really staunch supporters stepped up and provided more, which I think is something that other organizations should be thinking about. Who is in your core circle, who believes in you so completely, right? That this is a moment when they're going to give more because they want you to survive and to thrive. We really relied on that. And then we did find some new support around some of these new initiatives. Anytime you start something new at a nonprofit, that creates opportunities for new funding partnerships. And so we've seen that happen as well. We also applied for every single COVID relief, anything that we came across. And I want to give a lot of credit to the foundation and the to the foundation community who have stepped up, I think, quickly and significantly and are increasing their spends, right? Or in the case of some major national foundation, or even exploring new ways to bring in resources like bonds, which is really interesting. So I think that that's how we have navigated these past few months. Moving forward, I think there's, I think some days I think the bigger challenges lie ahead. What is support going to look like this year? I think we aren't sure. And so we're budgeting very conservatively, right? So we don't find ourselves in hot water, and we're going to navigate it as best we can.
Interesting.
That's wonderful. You hit on several things, but one is, really those supporters. Your board stepped up. Kudos. I mean, that's huge, right? Because we've also heard so many times that the board is MIA and we can't get them to respond, or they're taking care of their own fires within this pandemic. So kudos, honestly, to you and the organization for that. The two questions that have been coming up now over all of these episodes is, what is your immediate need and what does your long-term recovery look like? And that's something that all of us in this space really need to be clear on. And you used that word earlier, get clear, right? But the other thing was that I call it that angel check or blank check donor, and that's your angel check donor. I use that interchangeably. It's someone that believes wholeheartedly in your organization, wholeheartedly in your mission, and you can call them up and say, this is what we're facing, and this is the gap which we need the support. And it could come from one person or multiple individuals that really own that blank check partnership. And that takes a lot of relationship building. You have to, of course, make sure that that individual or individuals has the capacity to give. But wow, I am so impressed, Caitlin. And I just want to say, thank you for sharing all of this over this time, right, Julia? Like we've talked a lot of human service organizations, but we're also really interested in hearing from, arts and culture and animal and higher education. Like this pandemic, as we know, has impacted absolutely everything around us. So I'm just fascinated.
It's really interesting. And I think that's kind of, as we believe it or not, we're coming to the end of our time together. I really would love for you to talk about how you're selling your community and your donors of why art is important. That there is a healthy part to a community. How do you sell that when you've got food banks and shelter services and medical situations that are catastrophic? What's your argument there?
Yeah, well, I think, it's the arts always deal with this on some level, right? It becomes more pronounced during a period of extraordinary need for the social service sector. But I think, I avoid like the plague conversations that are about why arts are more important, right? I don't think that's true. It's more that, you need everything and there's an ecosystem here, right? That needs nurturing and support. And so I think that, for us, there's a few points that we drive home around why the arts are necessary right now and are in need of support. And one of that's tactical, right? I mean, I've talked a lot about the tactical today, right? That sort of rapid response. Okay, what can we do? What role does art uniquely play in this moment? And how can it influence, in our case, like behavior at sites and help people kind of observe these new behavioral requirements. I think another is about, and we've talked about this too, this need for this sort of yearning for expression, right? And for storytelling. I have a colleague who talks about how we make sense of our experiences by telling stories, right? And art is such a powerful medium for that. And artists are such incredible storytellers, right? So creating opportunities for us to make sense of this moment in time through artistic expression, professional and amateur, is really, really important. And so that's a big piece as well. And then Mural Arts has always believed that art is a method for raising up underrepresented issues, underrepresented concerns in society. We have long grappled with, systemic inequity, systemic racism in our work. I think that this moment in time is really elevating those issues on a broader level. So in some ways, we're building on work we've been doing for a long time, but there is, again, this window of opportunity to really bring artists in as sort of, interpreters of that, representatives of those experiences. And so that's a big piece of our work, but will continue to be in this moment. And then I guess the last, and this is probably the hardest one to quantify, but artists are really visionaries. They offer, they think a little outside of the box, right? They offer ideas for how we can work, how society could work, that maybe you can't see on a day-to-day basis. And I think this is a moment that calls for vision, right? This moment calls for change systems and new ways of doing things. And I think artists are incredible partners to that kind of an effort. So I think that's another really important value that the arts offer at this time.
Wow. Before we sign off, Caitlin, you had mentioned that there's something on your website where we can go and find what kind of household basic common items we have maybe access to that we can incorporate as, art hobbyists, if you will. Many of us, myself, have children at home or we're just bored in the house, right? So point us to where we could find that resource, please.
Yeah, so our website, if you just go to muralarts.org, Art in Action is the sort of place where we're collecting all of our COVID response work, actually. And Homeschool at Mural Arts is the name of the tutorial series that I mentioned.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Wow. Well, this has been great. I so appreciate your voice. I know that this is a tough time for an organization like yours, but as you've been able to articulate, it's a really necessary time. And I love, love, love what you said about the visionary aspect of expression and art and how that can lead us. That's the big takeaway for me today, because that's true. And I love the way you phrased it. I think that's amazing. Hey, everybody, I'm Julia Patrick. I've been joined by the great Jarrett Ransom, the nonprofit nerd. We are thrilled to have had you today with this meaningful conversation. Super important. Caitlin, here's Caitlin's information, muralarts.org. It's a great website, and I love how you capture the history of what's gone on in your city and how it is going forward. It's super cool, and so check that out. It's a great way for, I think, a lot of communities to look at a pattern and a trajectory of what an arts organization can do in terms of building community. I just am so enamored by all of your projects and what you're doing. Art organizations, big shocker, don't always tend to work well together. I know, Caitlin, you're just shocked by that. No, I really love this. And so I think you've led the way for a lot of other communities across this country. So thank you very much. Again, we want to thank our sponsors. Without you, we couldn't be coming to you every day. It's been really a great conversation today. We're going to have another great conversation tomorrow. So join us. I'm Julia Patrick, reminding you to stay well so you can do well. Thanks so much, everybody.
Caitlin.
Thank you, Caitlin.